Right, let's speak to Michael Kugelman. He is the Deputy Director of the Asia Programme at the Wilson Center. He joins us now live from Washington, D.C. Welcome to the programme. What's your assessment of the Taliban's rule 1 year on in Afghanistan?
Well, it's been a very difficult year for Afghanistan, for sure. And the Taliban has really struggled from the start to deal with this catastrophic humanitarian and economic crisis, which indeed was caused in great part by the international sanctions regime, which meant that all of this money on which Afghanistan was so heavily dependent for so long really went away, was eliminated. The Taliban has really been in over their heads. They don't really have experience dealing with these types of policy challenges and emergencies. They've also have been unable to deal with the persistent threat of terrorism posed by Islamic State Khorasan. And unfortunately, sometimes I feel they've been more focused on appeasing their rank and file and their hardliners than they have in actually tending to affairs of state. You know, they've had these grand spectacles honoring the families of suicide bombers and things like that. That's not going to get the job done when you've got millions of people on the verge of starvation.
And a question that I put to our correspondent there was about, the transition of being fighters to actually, knowing how to rule, the governance. Do you think that they can actually rule, or are they still intrinsically fighters?
I mean, I think we should acknowledge they have gotten some things done well, in the sense that they've been able to ensure that the government continues to bring in revenue, and that's been particularly through customs tariffs. Border trade has been ongoing with a number of neighboring countries. And the Taliban has also been credited for reducing corruption within the ranks. But I think that's in part because you don't have those huge amounts of money coming into the country as in the past. And obviously, when you have all kinds of money coming in, you're going to have more chances of corruption. They also were able to pass a budget, the Taliban, in recent months. So that's an achievement right there. But yeah, they really have struggled because certainly when they were in insurgency, they had shadow states. They did deliver basic services in the areas they controlled. But it's one thing to do that in portions of the country, but being able to do that across the entire country while dealing with so many other responsibilities, that's something that this group is still trying to figure out how to do.
And is the relationship that the Taliban has with the international community sustainable? And does the international community even have, the appetite to really deal with the issues facing Afghanistan, given how embroiled it is with Ukraine right now?
Right. I mean, as you know, no country has recognized the Taliban regime. And after what happened with the discovery of Ayman al-Zawahiri in Kabul, I think it's essentially an impossibility that any country will recognize the Taliban regime. And that means that you're not going to see much economic assistance beyond humanitarian aid. And indeed, you're right, and this is a terrible thing for the Afghan people, but the world has really moved on many levels. Certainly the West and the United States, we've received news today that the U.S. is not going to consider releasing frozen funds, frozen Afghan bank asset funds back to Afghanistan. So yeah, as I said a number of times, I fear that in Washington, Afghanistan is really in the rearview mirror, and the U.S. is keen to put more distance between itself in Afghanistan moving forward. And obviously, it's the people in Afghanistan that lose out the most from that. They need as much help as they can get from the international community.
And it is striking, to hear you say that the world has really moved on. I mean, we see it even from, a news agenda. We cover, so much else, of course, we keep a close eye on Afghanistan, but what does the fact that the world has moved on then mean for the women, the children and young girls that cannot go to school, and also the millions on the brink of famine right now?
Right. I should say, to clarify, the international media, including your channel, have been terrific in covering Afghanistan and the plight of Afghans. I will say that. I'm talking more about governments. But you're right. I think that the plight of Afghan women is what stands out the most, because they are, on many levels, the most vulnerable community in Afghanistan. So the economic stress, the food insecurity, the shortages of healthcare, they suffer disproportionately from that. And indeed, when you don't have that much needed assistance coming from the outside world to provide more funding, more liquidity, indeed, they lose out the most. And I think it falls to powerful voices within the Afghan diaspora and others that have voice and authority to ensure that awareness continues to be there around the world, to ensure that key people are thinking about the need to continue to focus on Afghanistan in some way.
Michael, thank you very much indeed. And yes, we have kept a very close eye on Afghanistan. Thank you for that comment. Michael Kugelman from the Asia Programme at the Wilson Center. Really appreciate your time today.